Today, you will be able to write equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. And let's go ahead and start by reviewing our concept of what parallel lines are. The geometry definition says that there are two lines that never intersect and exist in the same plane. Well, we're going to add a little bit more to it. You can see my definition here, that is the algebra definition, says that they have the same slope. So let's go back to our slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. And we're going to look at two separate lines. The first line, let m1, that's the slope of the first line, and m2, the slope of a second line, represent the slopes for two unique linear functions. Well, if the slope of the first line is equal to the slope of the second line, then the lines are parallel. For example, looking at these two equations, you notice that the slope for both these equations are 2. Therefore, they are parallel. So take a moment and write down this critical piece of information if you haven't done so already. Now let's talk about perpendicular lines. Those are lines with opposite reciprocal slopes. What does that mean? That means given the same, any two lines with the slope m1 and m2, we're going to look for lines that are going to be intersecting at 90 degrees, And the way that looks like in algebra, that's this formula here. Okay, and looking at a couple of examples, you'll see that our first line, the slope is 2. And the second line, the slope is negative 1/2. So if I kind of use the formula I have up here, that would be 2. Is that equal to negative 1 over 2? See, they're negative reciprocals. So let me remind you what a reciprocal is. A reciprocal means that the numerator and the denominator switch sides. So the negative reciprocal would be for this side over here. See, the negative of a negative is a positive, and reciprocal means you switch the top and the bottom. You see that you have 2 is equal to 2. All right. Let's look at a few examples and then get you your assignment. All right, in our first example, I ask you to write the equation of a line that passes through the point 12,5, which I have shown right there, and is parallel to the graph of 2/3 x minus 1. That's this bright blue graph there on top. So that's my original line. That's the information that was given. And we're supposed to use that information to generate this orange line right here, right? And what's special about that orange line is it has two conditions. The first is it's parallel. I guess actually the first is it goes through the point right here, that point 12,5. And the second condition is it is parallel to this first graph, the blue one. So what are my conditions for two lines that are parallel? They have to have the same slope. So right off the bat, you already know that this slope here is 2/3. And we're going to have to use this other piece of information that they gave us, the 12,5. Because while we can get the slope pretty easily, what we need to find is what is this part. That's what we have to find. What is the y-intercept so that we can write an equation of the line. So we're going to go back to this point because that point, right, it's my 12,5 point where 12 is an x value and 5 is a y value. So we can just take that x and y and plug it into our equation, where 5 is my y value, is going to be equal to my slope, which was 2/3, times my x value, which is 12, plus b. Then it's just a matter of solving for b. So I can see that 2/3 of 12, you can use your calculator for that. I'll use some old math, is 8. So I got 5 equals 8 plus b. And then we're just going to subtract 8 from both sides. You're left with -3 equals b. So what's my grand equation after doing all this? Well, my equation would be y equals same slope, right? We know it's the same slope, 2/3 x, and then my b, -3. There you go. That is the equation of this orange line that we were able to generate. So let me show it to you in a very quick and precise method. So first off, we know that our slopes are the same because they say they're parallel. So I'm just going to put my slope, 2/3. And then I'm going to plug in my x value and my y value. My y value is 5. 5 equals 2/3 times 12. And then we're just going to have to solve for the b. You take that out and you ended up with y equals 2/3 x -3. So now it's your turn. Go ahead and pause the video and try to solve this one. You should have gotten this as your initial setup, where we got the -1 was my y value, the 2 was my slope, and the -3 was my x value. And then you solve for b. If you have not done so, please pause the video and do so now. All right, so I got the equation of y equals 2x plus 5. That is the equation of a line that passes through -3, -1, and is parallel to y equals 2x plus 3. All right, let's get back to perpendicular. For this example, I ask you to write an equation of a line that passes through 2, 4. That's this point right here, 2, 4. And is perpendicular. And you got to know the property for perpendicular to this graph right here, which is the light blue one that's indicated right there. So you got to know about the negative reciprocal. Okay, so let's find our slope first. The negative reciprocal, all right, of 1/3, negative. So that becomes a negative, and remember the 3 goes on top and the numerator goes on bottom. So what is my slope going to be? Well, it's going to be -3. Okay, so I know right off the bat that this right here is -3. -3/1 if you want to be technical. All right, and then I'm going to plug in my x and y value from the point, right? Because the big idea was that it goes through this point. It's not just enough to have a perpendicular line. We want a perpendicular line that goes through a specific point. And you're going to find out a whole lot more about that, or you probably already know this about in physics, that there's something called force. If you want to make the greatest impact, well, you want to hit whatever you're going to hit at a 90-degree angle, at a perpendicular degree angle. So that's where you're going to see this information. So let's go ahead and plug in the rest of this, the 2 and the 4, the 2 and the 4. So let me get a little darker here. So y is 4 is equal to -3 times my x value, which is 2. And then we're just, again, going to add the b and find out what b is. We end up with -6 equals 4. And then you add 6 to both sides. You get 10 equals b. So my equation for this, my general equation, because that's what we're trying to do, is write the equation of the line that meets these two conditions, is y equals your new slope. It's not the same. It's not parallel. So -3 x and plus 10. So being very clear what the steps are, you got to take this fraction right here and do the negative reciprocal. Okay? And then you take that, you're going to plug it into your formula using this y and this x. So you get 4 equals your slope, which was -3 times the x plus b, and then you solve for b. So I believe we got 10 equals b. And then once you have your b, you put your generic equation. Y equals -3x plus 10. All right, now go and pause the video. Oops, let me clean that up a little. Go and pause the video and answer this question. All right, so your first step would be to plug it on all information. And if you look, I did something wrong. Take a moment and try to figure out what I did wrong. If you notice, I had written a 2 instead of the negative reciprocal. It's very important that you pay attention. Are you dealing with perpendicular or parallel? All right, so here we go. 8. We'll actually go ahead and solve for b here. All right, so after you solve it, you should end up with y equals -1/2x plus 8.5.